I was a keynote speaker at this conference 2 years ago, and I'm happy to be back in Boston almost. And so I'm going to throw it to Aishima for an intro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aishima Harris, and I'm the project director for East New York Farms. We're located in Brooklyn, New York, and we operate currently 4 community gardens, 2 half-acre farms. We hired 37 interns for 9 months as a paid internship program. They're all from East New York, and we love to grow food and support the community as much as possible.
Nancy? Thank you, Aishima.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Nancy Ortiz Saroon, and I'm a co-founder and core farmer at La Finca del Sur, South Bronx Farmers. We're in the Mott Haven, Port Morris area of the Bronx. We are entering our 12th season, and we're not a conventional farm in that we're not in a certain residential neighborhood. We're on an industrial area, an industrial zone, but our volunteers, our core group of farmers, are what uplifts us and keeps us going. We have various community related programs. Most recently, the South Bronx Food Hub, which was started in response to the pandemic last season, and really addresses the needs of people in the South Bronx area. It's a collaboration of 4 community gardens and farms, and we did I think a tremendous job of just like joining together with residents, with other farmers, and keeping that local, fresh, healthful food hub going last season. And we're hoping to continue our work with people of all generations, focusing on also the immigrant communities around La Finca, and producing just community good vibes and fresh food.
So I want to just give a little bit of context to how 2020 started. There's 550 or more community gardens in New York City. Easily over half of them are on city-owned land, and the Parks Department administers those gardens. And every 4 years, we get a 4-year license to run the gardens. This past, I guess it was 18 or 19 when we got our newest license, which had grown from 7 pages to over 17 pages. And there was a lot of discomfort for many of the gardeners to sign. So as we went through the first season of that, we tried to negotiate with the Parks Department. We had some success on some easy issues, but we didn't hit some of the bigger ones, which in particular were the liability issues, where the gardeners themselves, who were volunteers in these gardens, were going to be held liable for any accidents, and they had to get their own insurance. And in the very beginning of all this, about half the gardens did not sign their licenses. And it became a bigger and bigger issue as we went through. A number of gardens did sign. Some of them signed with an amendment saying, I object to this, this, and this, and those were rejected. And then as we got into 2020, I would think about 1/3 of the gardens at that time had not signed. And as the pandemic started, just as the spring season started, we ran into a lot of issues. And that's what I'd like to talk to these 2 amazing women about, is how did you manage through the seasons? Let's start there. How was 2020 in terms of, I think you signed, Aishima, you signed your license fairly early on in the process, I believe. But you grow an awful lot of food on your farm. So maybe you could just give us a sense of what you did early on and what kind of resources you did or didn't get from Green Thumb.
multiple things to touch on. So one of them is that our gardens are unique and our farms are unique in the sense is that it's run by an organization where most of the community gardens are run by people power. It's just like people coming together and running those gardens, where for us, we apply for grants to staff the gardens, to manage the gardens and all that good stuff. So that's one benefit that we were able to have on that level. Also, the agreement and understanding with the license from my predecessor was that most of these rules were like in place already, but it was just hard to enforce those rules. So now that Green Thumb was going after gardeners to enforce those rules, people really felt like shocked or backhanded. And then to add on to it is more rules where community gardeners cannot make an income from the gardens that they're maintaining themselves, but yet, like you mentioned, they're left to have their own license. They're left to like insure their gardens themselves. They're left to collect dues and have all these events, but not charge people to use the space. So that's also another slap in the face for community gardeners, because a lot of the gardeners are also elders and they're retirees. So this is a form of enjoyment for them. It's a form of way for them to earn some income. And that's what we've done at East New York Farms. We allow for community gardeners to sell their produce at our farmers markets, or we will sell it for them. And then the income goes directly to them. With that stipulations, like it caused a lot of community gardeners to not want to grow food. In terms of the conflicts that we had this year, one, we weren't able to hire as many interns in 2020 as we normally would. In a typical year, we'll have 37 to 40 youth interns. We cut that down to 20. We're also facing like a missing gap within our youth program because our youth program is based on tiers. So we're missing a whole entire tier. We weren't able to assist community gardeners at all. Like we have over 60 community gardeners in East New York and we work with all of them. But this time around, we were not able to work with not one community gardeners. And as I'm driving around, because I live in East New York, I could see a lot of gardens and weeds. There's no activities, pretty much dead and vacant. And you have gardeners calling us, asking for help and support, but we weren't able to do that. We also weren't able to provide mini grants like we do every year to community gardeners that will help them beautify their space, buy resources that they need for themselves and their space. And in terms of Green Thumb support, I remember I received an ask from Green Thumb to see if our youth program could go out into East New York and support these community gardens. And I'm like, we only have 20 youth. We have 4 farms that we have to operate. Like, where's the support? Like, how can we give support to community gardens if we need it ourselves in order to fulfill our mission and our role in the community, especially being that we're the only organization that focus on food justice in East New York. So that was a weird ask. Like, I wish the funding that they had last year that they had to run through to redesign these community gardens could go towards local organizations or having a mini grant where community gardeners could apply and have their own staff and have their own youth programs or hire people from the community to work with them and provide a stipend. So those are the challenges that we faced last year.
Yeah. And I try to keep my own personal viewpoint out of this because I was part of the negotiations with Green Thumb, and I'm very jaded by the whole process. I think that had we been able to have sat down much earlier on in the process, the issues that you're raising, many of them would not have come up. But so Nancy, tell us, both of your gardens are such an important part of your community. So tell us what you experienced at the beginning of 2020 and into the pandemic.
Yeah. So, some of Amisha's dialogue and thoughts resonate with me. We had to scale back to a certain extent, but, we were lucky in that we had a solid group of farmers that will come no matter what. And a strong volunteer base that was added to this year by local university students and so forth. In terms of the license we did sign, just because our farm is very unique in that it is It is the jurisdiction of about 4 different entities, including parks. So, by not signing, by not at least having, the whatever alliance we can create through the Parks Department and Green Thumb, it leaves us in a lot more of a risky position. And the other thing is that we knew that this farm is a safe haven, especially for immigrant families who comprise a lot of our member base and are the most local people to the farm. So by not signing, but not creating a safe space for them, it would have put us in a really, really vulnerable position. No one saw the pandemic coming, but we were able to get an insurance policy that is somewhat affordable through one of our members. I really wish that we had spent the money and time rather than going at each other legally, between the city and Green Thumb and Community Gardens Coalition, in finding just an affordable insurance, because safety is important, especially in a spot like ours, where we're a little isolated, where it's truly a farm. It's not, very manicured or whatever, but it's a beautiful health-giving spot, that we could not afford to sacrifice. So as I said, it became a safe haven for the local families who really were the energy and driving force in keeping this going during the pandemic. Just think about it. People lost their jobs. People are living, sometimes in multi-generational households, including my own. So the farm became like a safe haven for them to come. And in caring for the farm, it helped to alleviate a lot of that pain that, came down on all of us during 2020. So, the decision to get this insurance policy was a sacrifice for us, but you know what? I believe that when you do things with good intention, good comes back to you. So as a result of the pandemic, there was a farm hub that was developed between 4 community gardens in the South Bronx. That was a central group, and then a larger group that also got some granting to raise food and create a food hub that happened like bi-weekly or 3 times a month, to local organizations and groups that needed the food. So we were able to recoup, some of what we had to put out for insurance in terms of this funding. In terms of the restrictions that were just discussed, I have become a person who really believes in asking forgiveness rather than permission many times. I believe in keeping an open dialogue with Green Thumb, because I think that what we talk about is not anything that we have to go, behind closed doors to discuss. This should be an open dialogue for everyone. And, if we need to do something for our community, for our farmers, for our members, then I will let them know. That's, and sometimes you meet with opposition, but, I think that they understand the importance of the work that we are doing in our farms and gardens. And in the end, we're talking about people who are part of this great big machinery that is New York City and, our local government. An elder in the gardening movement advised us when we were, trying to decide whether or not to do this insurance for ourselves. And, she said, let's just sign this for now and get the work done, and then deal with whoever is coming into office very soon. And I think that's where our energy should be, pushed and focused. So, Aziz, thank you. You'll see some slides of our farmers who just carried on and did the work. We had to adhere to safety protocols. We talked about this, and a lot of times it was families working together, but you know what? You may have someone else coming to visit. So that helped to enforce, the importance of using, the PPE, partnering with local politicians to get hand sanitizer, to get masks, to get support. And so, we did the best with what we had. And that's really how we have made La Finca sustainable over 12 seasons.
Yeah. And so I love what you just said, Nancy, because I think there's a lot of acrimony that was created by the license issue, and I think that in part we a lot of us felt like we were left alone during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and so like back to East New York farms, you have a lot of different places, a lot of farms out there, basically, right? And so, were you able to distribute food to people? How did that work for you last year?
Yeah, so last year we began a season. We distribute free plants to community gardeners. We prioritize them first. So if you're growing food for the community, here's a tray or 2 trays of plants, and it's for free. Normally we'll do a plant sale, but I'm like, it's a pandemic. We can't do this, um, so we gave away everything for free, and we asked community gardeners what they want us to grow. We save seeds, a ton of seeds, and we're able to give it away to community gardeners that they could grow for this year. Also, we had a soil distribution, and we have free soil testing for community gardeners because they need soil to grow in. And with DSNY, with the lack of compost, we had like a compost mount on site, and people like literally came and bag it themselves and take it home. They're like, this is what we want. We want to be off resource to you. We don't want to charge for the service that we're here to provide to the community. We also was able to do food distributions in the community. So we have weekly food distributions throughout the pandemic. We still was able to have a farmers market, which took a hit, but we knew that was going to happen. But people still came out and people still supported, which really matters to us. We were able to partner with local senior centers or senior living residencies where we dropped off produce to them. We were also able to deliver produce to seniors or people who have been tested positive for COVID. So that was really great. Yeah, we were able to like shape our program in a different way that we've never seen before. We were like, what's priority for us? What can we sustain? What can we maintain? And what can we bring to the space? And from all of that work that we did last year, like you experienced burnout throughout the season because you're here trying to provide food for a community that's underserved and you're the only one doing it. So a lot of staff receive burnout from that. And we're trying to figure out like this year, like what's more sustainable. So learning from last year, bringing it into this year and not carrying that baggage with us because it's not going to get us anywhere. That really helps us.
And I think for the people in Boston, tell us what your neighborhood is actually like. I'm wondering what the COVID rates were like there too. Aishima?
In East New York, COVID
Yeah,
rates.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I can't remember like which number in the map we were, but I know one particular neighborhood in East New York, Starlight City, which have poor public transportation, access to nothing. They were hit by COVID really hard, and we don't have a farmers market out there. We weren't having food distributions out there, and this year made us like rethink like which zone or where do we need to be in the community? How can we reach the community better? Because we were so centralized. Now I'm thinking of like expanding our operation so that we're serving East New York in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah, and just one last thing before we go to Nancy, what's the demographic of the neighborhood of East New York?
Yeah, so like 52% of our residents, they are African American, 40-something% is Latina, and the rest is from like Asian population. So they're like Indians or Asians. So yeah, and 40% of our population is youth, and just like we're definitely underserved. We have type 2 diabetes, obesity, some of the highest rates in the city. So we're trying our best in order to educate folks on how to eat healthier, even to adjusting their recipes. So having a cookbook, doing virtual workshops to educate people, encouraging them to grow their own food at home and providing them with the resource to do that. That's what we're trying to fight right now. And even like trying to create more job stability in the neighborhood for youth that are going into college or furthering their education so that they could have a balance and be able to like learn while earning money, earning income for their family. Another thing that we found too is like majority of the youth that we hired this year, they're the ones that were paying their bills. They're helping their mom paying gas, utilities, like groceries, all that stuff. So we had to pay them. We had to have them work.
Right. Yeah, Nancy, thank you. Yeah, you know, you're being very modest, by the way, because the work that you do and the work that your volunteers and your staff do in East New York is truly amazing. And anybody who sees that, you know, who's on the ground there and sees what you do will be blown away. Every time I go out, I just can't imagine I'm still in New York in some places there. So thank you for
Thank you.
all your
It's
work,
so
and don't
much
be so modest.
It's so much to talk about. It's so much to like fit. It's like, what do I talk about? But yeah, we do almost everything.
Yeah. Well, you'll get a chance to say some more. Don't worry.
Thank you.
So Nancy, tell us about the same idea, the demographics and how you were able to help your community.
Yeah, our demographics are very similar to East New York. I would just say that we probably have a slightly higher Latino population because we have a big community of immigrants from Central America, from Mexico, Honduras, and now a growing West African population that, you know, has come down a bit from the Grand Concourse area. You know, I so admire what Aishima was saying because it is important not to miss the mark with economics. You know, the economics are really, really important. And this was something that was really threatened during this season of pandemic. You know, youth stipends are very important and help carry households in places like East New York and the South Bronx. So, you know, being able to, you know, stipend youth through this special initiative, a response to COVID that, you know, was able to enter the South Bronx through the Botanical Gardens and through joint granting. So I think this whole idea of cooperative economics, of, you know, just emphasizing to everyone who helps shape this work that, you know what, we need sustainability, and sustainability is money. Sustainability is the ability to create spaces for that economic uplifting to happen, because people don't want handouts. People want to be able to be proactive. And, you know, I'm blown away always by East New York Farms. I worked with a group of student interns for 2 or 3 seasons through the Botanical Gardens, and we did trips to East New York. It was one of the sites that we saw citywide, and it's amazing. So La Finca, even though it is on a much smaller scale, and our volunteer and member base is a little different, and the youth tend to be like a cyclical infusion of energy and power and thought. You know, we really want to work more to create an intergenerational network, so that, you know, the knowledge of more elder farmers and the energy of these youth, and, you know, supported by a city and a government that's understanding, and a way to, you know, raise funds, such as, you know, creating your own added value products and information to the community. You know, that's all important. And they're things that we were really hoping to develop last season before the world totally changed on us. But we're looking forward, as, you know, things change back again, you know, to be able to do better. But I think that coalition is the key. And I think that this past year was really a lesson in that, in different gardens from our area getting together on, you know, under one purpose, you know, that affected everyone. So yeah, so that's what I would say about that. I don't have the wonderful statistics that you have. I have my I'm actually not home right now, but yeah, but it's a very similar demographic. Oh, the one thing I did want to say is I really love the idea of providing resources for people to raise food at home. And I would say this is the most marked difference between the South Bronx and East New York. There are homeowners, there are people who rent long time in spaces in Brooklyn, in East New York and other areas that have access to outdoor space. And that's not necessarily the case in the South Bronx. The South Bronx is one of the most densely populated areas and with some of the least green space in the city. So that's another challenge. You know, if you provide seeds, if you provide even a window box, you know, just helping people to become educated in terms of that. But having gardens open as a resource are the most important things, because, you know, if you have your little set of pots and you want to leave it there and, you know, that's how you're going to, you know, help contribute as a community member, then that's really more the way that we do it in the South Bronx.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, you'll have heard me say it about a million times that we call them community gardens for a reason, right? We don't call them gardens because they really are all about community and about how we interact, no matter, you know, good times and bad times. And so, you know, it almost feels like deja vu, because I think a lot of us, you know, March 13th is a big marker date for us. It's been a year since the pandemic really forced us into different places and different opportunities. And so I want to kind of talk about opportunities, you know. I try to stay optimistic. I make my wife crazy sometimes trying to be so optimistic, but I think there's going to be something good that can come out of what happened here. And what did we learn from it? So what did we learn from it? Where, you know, Aishima, you actually started to go down that road that, you know, new models and different ways to reach to your communities. Let's talk a little about that. What do you see as the model for 2021?
For me, for my program, I learned that pace is great to have. So not to overwork yourself and feel like you have to reach every single goal within the growing season, but to pace everyone out. We have 9 staff person, including myself, that's running like this whole entire operation. And mental health awareness, like how can you have certain, just like a mental health week or break in the program. I've learned to implement that. I remember a lot of times in the summer, I would tell my staff, don't come to work, just take the day off. I don't want a text message, I don't want an email. Just, this is your mental health day. Just like take the day off and just refocus and recenter. Learning how to still operate and meet in our milestones, given like the work days that we have, because now we're our space, we have to share the office space. So we're working 2.5 days on site and 2.5 days virtually. So then we have to create a virtual program for the youth interns as well. So knowing how to create a program that's easy to pivot, learning how to, and I think more than ever, community gardeners are realizing that they need to have a succession plan because a lot of community gardeners, as I mentioned, is like very much older, and they hold on to their land for so long, and sometimes does not welcome like the younger generation into the space or to be a part of the garden in a meaningful way. And some community gardeners that are really sick, or they realize like, oh, I can't do this any longer, they can't, like, they're like, who am I gonna pass this on to? I need to find somebody. So they will call us and they will like ask us like who to pass it on to, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, you've been here longer than I have. You've been gardening longer than I have, so I can't tell you who to pass that land, that space onto. You have youth who want to own the space. When I'm saying youth, like adults that are like 25 or older, who want to own the space and like reinvent the space. So I think that's a lot of learning curve that community gardeners are facing right now, is like having a succession plan and not having land that's just sitting there not being used in communities. Also, how to provide like job stability that Nancy mentioned, how to provide job stability. I'm working on building out our youth program so that we could hire college students, older students to work on our composting operation. That's a new project that I'm working on. I'm also working on having a year-round greenhouse. So having a bigger farm space so that we could grow year-round for the community and teaching people how to grow year-round farming, and having seasonal farmers that could just come in and help support staff and community gardens during the growing season. So those are some of the, in terms of like capacity, but those are some of the things that I'm learning from last year on how to implement that into this year's program.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I was gonna say it's funny, but it's not. It's interesting that you talk about succession planning, because for years I've been pointing to myself and saying, the gardeners are graying out and we really need to find youth. And I think part of the problem in New York City especially is that it's become so transient, right? I mean, many of the original, the people who are old now, they were in their communities for a long time and continue to stay in their communities. But nowadays, people just go from, rental to rental, and then they buy somewhere else. And, so we see a lot of transient people coming through the gardens. And so I think it's, that the succession is something that's really, really important. And so do you think that the pandemic opened your eyes to that a little bit more?
Yeah, it really does, because in East New York, like I mentioned earlier, we have over 60 community gardens, and as I'm driving around, at least 10 or 20 of them is vacant. And you have Green Thumb that's trying to find like people to fill the space. And I'm like, this is why, if we're gonna have rules and guidelines or regulations, make sure that it's also sustainable and not just you put it on the iron fist, but like intentionally thinking about programs or rules and regulations that make sense for the community. And that's not succession plan is not a thing. And I spoke to one of my Green Thumb coordinator, was like, why don't you have as a guideline that the community garden needs to have a certain amount of youth or young adult as a part of their membership, so that you could have a succession plan, so they know that every season or every year you have a certain amount of youth or young adult that you have to have as a part of your garden membership. And so that you could like rope them in and be and have them like come up with like new ideas and new ways to be involved in the community. And I don't know where that went, but that was one of my suggestions.
And I think what you said is really right about the license and the governing that the Green Thumb tried to do. Is it became so heavy-handed that it became more difficult to be able to branch out and do something new without actually getting permission. Where, decades ago when gardens we never asked for permission. We just did it. We were volunteers. We were taking care of the land. So this really, this is where it really gets me. But I don't want to go down that road, because I'm trying to be optimistic. And I'll ask Nancy basically the same thing. What have you learned, and how do you think, what's 21 going to look like that's a little different, or is it going to be the same, do you think?
No, I don't think anything is going to stay the same, yeah. I mean, many of our farmers, and we're a much smaller group than East New York, really were restricted and had to change the way that they were able to engage in the garden because of threats of COVID, my husband and I included. Luckily we had, these farmers that were very local, that could walk to the farm, that maybe didn't have the same concerns, and they stayed within family units. So going to farm as families, really was something important to be able to keep La Finca going. But I agree with Aishima. This year we are going to actually engage in, right off the bat, starting next week actually, with a project that was brought to us by our Green Thumb Garden Liaison, and it's called Youth Rep. And it's an alternative to incarceration program. We're going to have a small group of youth participants in that program come and do specific projects in the farm. So they're going to help to create an herb garden. They're going to give input as to how to repair this geodesic dome, which basically serves as a year-round greenhouse for us. And we're really excited about this. I've been very involved in that. And, by bringing youth to the farm, because again, we're not a neighborhood entity. That's the way that we're going to keep, this growth going in terms of creating that succession. I also think, though, that organizations like Green Thumb, organizations like the Department of Justice, who are sort of underwriting this particular program, can talk about economic incentives. And you know what, Aziz is right. When we basically took these parcels of unused land and decided to feed community members and continue traditions and bring people together, yeah, we were not, offered a cent. We were not expecting that. But, youth right now are facing critical challenges. Displacement is one of them, incarceration is one of them, a school system that has, if anything, become more restrictive in terms of how students are engaging and, how it delivers to students. This is more important now than ever. So to create maybe programs that would include how to dialogue, because that transition, needs to happen, of course. Youth need to come in and, we really work best when we are, engaging in each other's energy and ideas and experience. But how about, programs in terms of how to dialogue, how to make these transitions? These are things that I want to explore, as well as with immigrant farmers. Immigrant farmers are voices that are not heard. And, sometimes, unfortunately, politically, they've got to stay under the radar. But here's what I have found, that a lot of the knowledge and a lot of the energy is being co-opted. And I'm not pointing fingers, but I'm just saying that, these are voices and energies and presence that need to be acknowledged, because it's a great deal of, how urban farming is evolving, even in terms of the crops that we produce. Okay, what residents want, because our communities are enclaves of all these different cultures. So I have a great deal of hope for Youth Wrap in terms of kicking off how we are starting that engagement of youth this year. Really excited about how much work we'll be able to get done with, just farmers coming in shifts, because we're not at the point where there should be 35 or 40 people on the site. But this will give us an opportunity over the 5 sessions for different farmers to come in and share, let's say, their expertise, or really learn what the expertise of those students are, how it can be directed. And, I'm really looking forward to what the result of that is all going to be. And sharing resources. We will continue to do that with other farms and gardens in the community. But I think that dialogue, I think that checking in and knowing what resources are out there and really be willing to share them. Like, I think that we have come from such a place where resources are scarce. Money is scarce. So if you have something, you're not as open to sharing with other entities, with other communities, with other gardens. But I think that 2020 and COVID really taught us that, that is the only way we're going to survive, by, sharing and really redefining how broad that community can be, and finding a way to link, even though the physical challenges are more, but finding a way to do it. Youth is certainly a key to that. And, this coalition of resources and ideas, this communication, this seeking ways to fund, how these transitions will go, and how our gardens will operate these years, and, what our families, our immigrant families need, to thrive and continue being vital parts of this garden landscape. I think that those are things that we really are going to throw our energy into this year.
Yeah, and Nancy, I put up on the screen this collage that you sent me. Do you want to tell us what we're looking at here? It's beautiful.
Sure. One of the things that, and thank you, Aziz, I feel honored by your words. I chose to include this because I didn't mention it before, that art and gardening are really, really connected. They're forms of expression, they're forms of connecting to what is not seen, okay? And what sometimes can't be articulated through words, because we're looking at cycles, right, of life and death and things that need to happen. This COVID pandemic, I feel a lot of the tragedy could have been avoided, but it really brought and honed to laser focus how precious it is and how thin that line between life and death is. So this is a collage that I made called Oya's Gardens. And Oya is an Orisha Yoruban deity. She's the caretaker of the cemetery. She doesn't enter into the cemetery, but she guards, that line between life and death. And, she also controls the storms, the weather. And you know what? That is something that is beyond human control. This COVID was a storm, okay? And it brought those two aspects, right, of life and death so close together. So, being home, we did things like harvesting honey. I was an artist originally. Thank you. And it just was a way for me to express, what I felt, was on us as a humanity, as a community, as people. And yeah, so this is where that came from. We also had the pleasure of working on a mural project right outside La Finca. And I sent Aziz some snaps of that also. And that brought together youth and elders. And it was about what's happening environmentally. It's what's about, this whole aspect of, what we lose, we may not be able to regain, that there is no plan B for the planet. And so thank you. I actually like the way it looks on screen. And it was a very
good.
personal,
Looks really good.
thank you. It was a very personal way for me to express what I was feeling and feeling grateful that I have the option of being a farmer, that I have the honor of being a farmer and a community activist, and being able to be part of the grief as well as the celebration.
Yeah. Well, you two women, and I like to think that it's women who are going to lead us out of the messes that we're in. And I think you two women are the shining examples of how this works. That that together we can make something good happen. That together we show our strength, and you two women in particular, you show how fierce you both are. I mean, I'm honored that you are here today, and I just, I'm watching the clock, and I want to try to give people a little bit of time to ask us any questions. So maybe if you could just give us a kind of a closing of what, Nancy, you were just so eloquent in what you just said. Aishima, I know you're going to do the same. So tell us what your hopes are, not just for 21, but just for, land tenure in New York and being able to continue this amazing tradition of community gardens in New York City.
Yeah. I'm hoping that the lessons that we learned about what matters, are going to carry forth. Everyone is standing in amazement, and I think feeling pretty good about the economic stimulus. And, I just look at my husband particularly, because he has to hear everything that I say, even during the pandemic when we're quarantined or whatever. And it's like, if all this money is available, if all these resources are available, and all we need is the vision to allocate them, to talk to each other, to listen to what people's needs are, then you know what, that is a dialogue that needs to be, continuous forever. And that is what is going to sustain this planet. That's what's going to sustain us as human beings, being able to help each other to really listen to what is needed, growing food, and fresh food and health. These are rights of all people. And I think community gardens are a major, major link to that, especially in our urban areas. I grew up in the South Bronx at a time where very few people were doing this. People were, urban farming and gardening as a way to hold on to culture. And culture is important. We have to know, who we are, to know our value. And that is my hope, that this awareness is going to grow and continue, that this spreading of resources and our ways to communicate to each other, how to do better, how to grow as, you know, people, as entities, as cultures, as planets are going to, you know, that this really was the reminder, the tap on the shoulder that we have to be aware of this every day.
Oh, you're on mute, Aziz.
Oh,
I had to mute because my dog was barking in the background. I was going to say that the tap on the shoulder is a very gentle way to say it. I feel like sometimes there's a big slap upside the head. But,
yeah.
but anyway, Aishima, tell us what you're thinking.
I definitely want to second what Nancy said. A lot of resource and support and information needs to be shared, and some form of like more sustainable gardeners coalition could be created. What I hope for is for community gardeners or food justice as a whole to gain its recognition that it deserves. I saw like this report from Bar President Eric Adams that basically broke down the city council members' budget towards urban agriculture. And a lot of the funds actually went towards hydroponics and aquaponics. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's just to show that community gardens are no longer being valued by politicians. They're no longer being valued by most grants. So a lot of times when you hear STEM programs and they associate STEM programs with indoor gardening, it's kind of like, so what am I doing on land? Is it not considered STEM or more than STEM? So I think the recognition, I hope for programs and community gardens to be recognized in a more sustainable, impactful way, so that grants could be created for community gardeners, regardless if you have a 501c3. As long as you're an individual that could receive the funds to support your community gardens, that should be more than enough. And I think a lot of community gardeners has a disadvantage towards those grants because they have to rely on other organizations to support them as a fiscal sponsor. They have to try to figure out how to put grant materials together if they never had that experience. Like, you know, so I feel like better recognition for food justice movers and shakers and community gardeners, because really, I personally feel bad for the stewards that came before me and still hold on to the space and trying to preserve the space and seeing that they're not being recognized for their efforts and the work that they've been doing for years.
And you know, I think you really hit on a subject that we really haven't touched enough on, and that's food justice. And I think for me, I mean, I've always understood how community gardens and food justice were so intersectional. But I think COVID really opened our eyes to this and how precarious food security, food insecurity is in New York City. And the ability for our spaces to provide some relief to that has become even more conspicuous than ever, I believe. And you know, we're headed into election season soon. We'll have a new mayor. The commissioner, Parks Commissioner, is stepping down before the end of the term, and so there's going to be a lot of changes. And we really have to, as a voting bloc, if nothing else, make sure that we turn out our voices in the coming months. There's like 80 people running for mayor in New York City, and maybe 85 now. Before this call is over, and we really need to hit up on them and make sure that our voices are continually being raised. But yeah, we could have a whole discussion on food insecurity. So I'd like to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. I know, Annabelle, you've been monitoring. Are there questions out there that people want to ask us?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that in part, some people ask questions and they might have been partially answered. So welcoming people.
Imagine that.
There was like so much information. I'm feeling so much gratitude for how much you guys were able to share. Thank you so much. So a more recent question was from Vidya, whether either of Nancy or Aishima was able to tap into grants foundation, city, federal grants for COVID support during all of the work you were doing?
Great
Well,
question.
yeah, the food hub that I described that the Gardens of the South Bronx are involved in was a grant that, sprung directly in response to COVID. So, and that, we were able to plug into by working together in coalition with other gardens because they were looking for like a partnership. So it was a grant that really encouraged, different gardens and entities to work together.
For East New York Farms, no federal grants, but we did receive a lot of foundational grants, especially to enhance our food distributions. And also we receive a ton of donations from corporations as well.
And to just go next point on that, did you get city council money at all? Either of you get city council money?
Yeah, we did, and but it sort of came indirectly. One of our greatest partners is Green Gorillas, and Green Gorillas is an organization that has been around forever. It's very grassroots. Began with the gardens on the Lower East Side. They've got new directorship now, a young woman named Sarah McCullough Williams, and I met her the night that she assumed the directorship there, and I told her about La Finca and I told her about the South Bronx, and she says, I'm going there. And this was like a Thursday, and Monday morning I was meeting her at my farm. And she is an example of, the advocacy and the personal linkage that we need to start creating more, to sustain urban agriculture and lots of community initiatives, arts, social programs and whatever. And, so she has been instrumental in being a liaison with the community, our community council person, Ms. Ayala, Diana Ayala. And I also have, visited Councilperson Ayala in her office, and she's really receptive but swamped. So what I would say is when you have organizations like Green Gorillas who have a certain way to communicate, right? And to keep fingers on the pulse of, what this funding is, they can be really instrumental in bringing together, the gardens, the projects, and the council person's attention. So that has really worked well for us.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Sarah too. She's been fabulous. She really breathed a lot of new life into Green Gorillas. She's great. Yeah.
Yep.
I will third that. I will third that. I currently work with Sarah at Green Gorillas as well. I developed a youth program for them.
Yes.
Yeah. I should have brought her in on this conversation. Yeah. The more women, the merrier, I think. You're also smart. Any other questions you have in there in the queue, Annabelle?
I have an earlier question from Maria. I mean, Maria, you had a lot of great contributions in the chat throughout the panel. I don't know if you want to actually voice anything that's coming up for you. I'm noting your earlier question about whether or not you, I guess, COVID and beyond, like just what has been your relationship with the city wanting to develop land that you're currently growing on. And I know you touched upon it in different moments, but yeah.
I mean, we're always under threat. I mean, it's, I think we're trying so many different ways to make sure that the land that we're on stays permanently open, stays as permanent community gardens. And there's a number of different, initiatives that are out there. We're hoping that they get more powerful as we get more powerful, but, open space in New York is limited. And when you see, the community gardens, when they came into these, when they became community gardens, they came out of distressed and marginalized communities and still marginalized communities in so many ways. So, as they build the community back up, gentrification comes in and, then everybody wants a piece of that land. It's a constant fight. And it's just, we have to find allies within the city government, and we have to find a commissioner who's really committed to community gardens. Ray Figueroa, who's the New York City Community Garden Board president, taught me early on. He used to say that in the lexicon of New York City, there's the two words community gardens barely exists. And just recently, there was a report out about food justice in the city and about open space and gardening. And they didn't use community gardens, they used urban agriculture and urban farms. And it was just kind of curious in its own way, but that's a topic for a different time, I suppose. But yeah, I think we all feel the pressure of, land grabs by rich developers.
Mhm.
I think I want to add to what you said, Aziz, about the way how they frame community gardens to urban agriculture. Also on the maps, like when you look on the city maps, it's open space.
Or vacant space.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe city property, but that's also, it caused a lot of developers to like call a lot of community gardens and harass them and showing up and doing like crazy offerings to community gardeners. So I think that also is a disadvantage.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And one thing COVID did not stop was the rise of these new buildings, especially in Mud Haven and Port Morris. With all the open land we had in Port Morris, where La Finca is located, there was nothing going on. And I tell you, since last year, you have just seen these towers rise and rise, and we feel like we're being encircled by all of this development. La Finca is actually located on a lot that is over the IRT subway station, and we're bordered by the Metro North and the DOT Major Deegan Expressway ramp on the other side. So we've always felt, that kind of kept us safe. But I'll tell you, when you see what developers are able to imagine and implement with enough money, it is enough, and I always tell our members, we have to remain vigilant. This, place always needs to remain vital for the community. And, we need to keep growing because, the opportunities are literally feet away from us.
And Aishima, there's a question that came up in the chat just now, and I'll read it. It said, they'd like to hear more from you about how you identified elderly people and people with COVID to bring food. Was it people affiliated with your gardens or just whoever was in your community? It's a great question.
Yeah, we served whoever was in East New York. There were people that called that didn't live in East New York that we had to say, unfortunately, we can't, like, we service East New York, that's our mission. So they will call us on a certain day or throughout the week, and we have a running list that we would add them to, and then we just call them and tell them their delivery time frame, and we just drop it off. And if they're COVID positive, they will let us know, or if they're recovering from COVID, they will let us know, and we'll tell them we'll leave it outside your house, or we'll leave it, if they live in an apartment building, we'll go upstairs and leave it outside the door and let them know that it's there. So that really worked and helped a lot. And also we try to service as many people as we can. So if someone received delivery this week, then the following week we wouldn't add them to the delivery list, because we're trying to make sure that we could reach the community as best as we can, and we didn't have the capacity to deliver to 100 people every week.
Yeah. So with 5 minutes left, I just want to just thank everybody. I thank you, the trustees, for inviting us here and letting us rant a little bit about New York City. And I'm imagining that, what happens here in New York City happens in Boston and happens in Philadelphia and all the major cities. And I especially want to thank you for letting us come in, because I think as we learn from each other, not just within our own communities, but from outside, that's how we grow, and that's how we can expand our knowledge base to make things better and to just keep moving on. And, if there's a lot that we learned, and I think the one thing that we did learn is I think Aisha said it, to be nimble and to be able to just, what's working, what's not working, and to take the best of it and bring it into this next year, and hope that we don't see this as again. But I'll just say it this way, with the climate crisis, we're gonna see so many different challenges ahead of us, and community gardens, I think, are a big piece of how we can mitigate many of the issues that we're about to face. And so, I don't have, I'm preaching to the choir clearly, but we all need to make sure that the spaces that we occupy continue to expand, and that we treat each other with dignity and love. And so that's my closing. I'll give you two a chance to close.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it better than that. Community is the the shining word here, right? We need to operate as community. We need to, not just say things, but carry these ideals and these truths that we know, through our actions and through our collaboration. So much of this has been so hard and will continue to be hard. But, it's sort of like when you're cleaning, seeds, you look for, and all this chaff and all this, organic matter. Here are the seeds. Here are the things that are going to grow and become, and sustain in the future. So I think that that's what we need to do. We always have to be, looking for those seeds, for those grains of truth and collaboration. And I really believe that's what's going to carry us through for, this generation and all the ones coming.
Yeah, and to add on to both of yours point, I think also being very intentional and deliberate about how we show up in the spaces and who we also invite to the spaces that we share as a community, and also acknowledging everyone as human first, because if we don't see each other as ourselves, then we won't ever respect each other, and that's what sometimes we tend to forget. So leaving here today, and my thought with you is just be a better human, and making sure that the energy that you're your energy you're sharing with each other, and energy you're sharing with yourself is also pure and filled with intentions, and nothing but the best intentions out there.
Thank you.
That's gorgeous. Thank you so much. Thank you, Boston. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Aishima. Thank you, Vidya. Great seeing you. Great seeing everybody that are friends in Boston. Come visit us. You have our emails. Come visit us in New York. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
so much. I hope that everyone will check out the program for tomorrow, starting at 5. We have 6 more great workshops coming, and yeah, just so much appreciation. It's really nice to get a window into a different city when we've all been, so separate, and to be able to connect with you all and hear your insight is really valuable. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Same.
Enjoy some
Thank you.
sun
Have a
if you
great
haven't
conference.
already. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, you too.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thanks, Aziz. Okay, we'll talk later. Bye.